Hey guys, welcome back to Team Death Slinger. My name is Peter, and today what I want to do is use this Digimon Stats Tool that I've created to look at cards with high average representation and recommend you guys cards that you might want to consider picking up instead of a booster box the next time you're out card shopping. Maybe cards that you might not own that could just bolster your collection and probably be useful in the future. So we're going to start with Digitama, and we're going to go through all the card types, and I'll recommend you a couple of picks off of my list. So starting with Digitama, we can see the highest representation comes from Demi Vmon that has a 13.6% representation across its lifespan, which is pretty good. But what I really want to highlight is BT11 Wanyamon. It has an 11.76% representation, so it's our third highest seen egg since its own release. And the reason I kind of want to highlight this is it's been relevant since BT11. That's quite a bit of time for an egg to be relevant, which means that it's more than likely going to stay the premier blue draw engine for a while longer, I would guess. I would also like to highlight BT14 Koromon, 11.03%. This is a great egg for red to do drawing things with. It pairs really well with the BT16 Ukomon, so as long as Ukomon's relevant, you will probably see this be the egg of choice for red chip damage. And I also think it's probably worth highlighting BT14 Tokomon. It's the vaccine egg of choice. If you mess with your security, you get to draw a card, and vaccine probably isn't going anywhere, even if Patamon went away somehow. If you mess with security, you're going to be using that BT14 Tokomon egg. So that is probably going to be it for my Digitama recommendations. Let's go ahead and move to Tamers. Now, with Tamers, I want to try not to highlight things that are too dedicated to a specific archetype, cards that will probably see a wider range of application than simply the argument that this deck is good, so you should buy these cards. Maybe longer standing archetypes we could do that, but the first card I want to highlight here is BT8 Digimon Emperor. Came out in BT8. And it has had a representation of about 15% since its release. That is quite high. It's been around for a while. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Basically, any time that rushdown strats are really good, you will see Digimon Emperor gain some relevance. It is a good way to stop your opponent from doing a lot of low-level swings and checks. Then I do want to highlight BT14 Satsuki. It has about 14% representation. This is a good black tamer to run in just about any deck that wants free memory in black, just because it gains you memory when your opponent has a Digimon, and it pairs really well with some of its keywords. Davis and Ken is also probably worth mentioning because Imperial is probably not going anywhere. And then EX7 Shoto Cosmo with 11% representation. Good way to get blocker generically. It's not color locked. You can just play in any deck that can play Tamers for free, and you're getting value off of it for free. It's probably also worth bringing up Cool Boy at about 7.5%, not super high, but when X Antibody is good, it can make appearances in some decks, although I do feel like it's kind of starting to get outpaced by some decks that are just naturally fast enough to not care too much about the Cool Boy value. Moving on to options, X Antibody Protoform, love it or hate it, this card has a 21% representation since its release. It is a really good option, and if you play cards that use the X Antibody trait, you might want to consider forking over the money to get yourself an X Antibody Protoform. Unless you think it's going to get restricted, then in that case I would consider perhaps being wary about picking up too many copies of this card. But if you don't care and you think it's good, you should definitely consider picking it up. It will give your decks a boost. If you're on the fence about it, it is, in my opinion, worth the money. I think it's better than regular X Antibody, as I think most people would agree. Ancient Guardian Deity is going to generically be good with 10 Warriors cards, which we will probably see more support for in the future because they are protagonists. Return of the Primogenitor, also 16% representation, really high. As long as Imperial's good, this is going to be a great card to offer you some protection and get your Evos for free. Heaven's Judgment, nice and cheap. You should definitely pick up some copies if you don't have any already. The regular X Antibody is a great budget alternative to Protoform. It sees a 12% representation, which is about half of Protoform, but it still has its uses in situations where you want your when attacking triggers and your when digivolving triggers kind of in the same phase there. And then Crimson Blaze, also fantastic, also cheap, and you should pick it up if you don't have it. For rookies, you're going to see a lot of memory blockers and things of that sort, but what I really want to highlight here is BT16 Ukomon. I'm really on the fence about whether I think Bandai would actually ever hit this card. It's not obscenely powerful on its own, even though the value it gives you is. This card has a 39% average representation rate. It is very likely that you could get value out of this card if you played it, and it is just good in lots of decks, whether you love it or hate it. So if you are struggling with consistency in your deck, this is a great card. I think it's worth the money to have a couple of copies of to splash into your decks if you so choose. Another card I'd love to highlight, BT14 Patamon, not a floodgate, not super locked to a specific deck. It fits in every vaccine deck, so definitely worth picking up if you think you might ever be interested in playing vaccine in the future. Aside from that, we're really just looking at super specific archetype rookies, which you could pick up, but you probably already have those if you're looking at playing your specific archetype like Vmon, Lugamon, or any of the, Wormmon type of stuff. And then you just have your memory blocker, so not much else to see in the rookies there as far as recommendations go. For the champions, we do see a lot of archetype specific things. Not really until we get all the way down to about 6% representation do we have Doberman X Antibody, which you could say is really specific to specific purple decks that are meta, but the reality is that the Dark Animal engine is really, really good for any jank purple deck you're playing. If you need a way to play a purple deck that is not very good and you want it to just work, you can always throw the Dark Animal engine at it. You can run the Dobermans. I think that's a great choice. And then for the most part, the rest of this is all going to be locked to, Lugomon specific stuff, Galgamon specific stuff. Numemon is still really high despite getting nerfed into the ground. That just shows you how insane that deck's representation was while it was good. But as far as this list goes, the only card I'm really interested in highlighting here is Doberman X, which, as some people seem to think in one of my other videos, should be restricted. So if you think it's going to get hit, maybe don't grab it, but it's also a really cheap card, so you might as well have your copies if you don't have them already. For our level 5s, this is where we have a lot of really interesting cards that I think are definitely worth picking up, just in general. So our number one most represented level 5 Digimon is Zudomon for BT14. The Ace has an 18% average representation rate. It is just fantastic at bouncing things to your opponent's hand for punishing them when you strip their sources, which is really common in blue, and it's a really powerful card for what it does. We also have the Paildramon for BT16. If you're interested, or you think you might be interested in Imperial at any point ever, probably definitely worth picking up your BT16 Paildramons. They are at an 11% representation rate, and they're just probably going to be crucial until it gets power crept out of the game. BT14 Magna Angemon, also a fantastic level 5 Blastace. It sees a lot of use in basically every yellow deck. If they're not running Angemon, they're running Magna Angemon. EX5 Edimon, going to have relevance in basically any yellow and or black deck that wants to force your opponent to attack. And then the Angemon Ace from BT15 that we mentioned earlier, an alternative to Magna Angemon, perhaps a little bit more on the defensive side with the recurring recovery effect when you have 3 or less security, also a little bit more aggressive with its DP reduction effects. We have EX6 Huangkumon, which is another great blue level 5 that allows you to unsuspend and get more aggro in. So we also have Cerberusmon X at 5%, but we're starting to get down to percents that aren't really significant in the grand scheme of things, Moving into our Mega level Digimon, we have some really, really high representation rates. We have Imperial Demon Paladin Mode Ace with a 36% representation rate. If you do not own any copies of this card, I definitely recommend you pick some up. Now that scrambles are here and the trash is really, really relevant, this is a great way to bottom deck your opponent's trash and get rid of any potential scramble targets and reduce their comeback potential. So probably worth forking over the $20 or so that a copy of this would cost, or two if you have the money for it. Shine Greymon Rune Mode, also 31% representation, really high. I know you either love this card or you hate it, but if you don't have a copy of this card, and you find yourself struggling to close out games, it might be worth forking over the cash to get a copy of it. Death Xmon, similarly 24% average representation. This card is really cheap right now. It's like $20, and the amount of versatility and power that it gives your deck is just kind of underrated at the moment. I feel like Rune Mode just eclipses it, but this card is insane, and if you don't have a copy of it, it is more affordable than ever, and you should totally grab one. We also have EX7 Hexablaumon at 23%. I don't see this really going anywhere as long as blue has a way to get into level 6s really cheaply and efficiently. And then Valkyriemon for BT16, also a fantastic level 6 that I don't see going anywhere. It applies a lot of offensive pressure for yellow-red decks. We have Venusmon for BT10, a fantastic defensive option in yellow, and also really cheap right now, and you can always run it as like a 2-of in your yellow decks as a secondary boss monster. It gets a lot of work done that way. Shadow Seraphimon is probably the last card that I specifically want to mention for the level 6s. It has an 11% representation rate, and it's a fantastic defensive tool for yellow and black, giving you the D-Digivolve effect and allowing you to pop some bodies when you get the Blast Ace Digivolve. So that's going to be it for this video. I just wanted to look at some cards that have some really high average representation, point them out, and suggest that maybe if you don't own these cards and you're thinking about buying a booster box or something of the sort, it might just be worth it to grab these singles and increase the power of some of your decks that are perhaps a little bit lacking. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Thank you to our YouTube members for supporting this channel. It's people like Langlong, Big Z11, and Coffee Deus who make videos like this possible.